Okay, so we're going to continue on page 415 and the array initialization. So if we take a look at it, we're going to see something a little different here. So in this case, we have an int. We see the left and right bracket that says this is an array, and the name of our array is going to be called days. So basically, we're creating an ice cube tray called days. Okay. Now, this case, we're going to say it's equal to, and now we're going to say left brace and a right brace. We're going to have a bunch of data in there. You're going to notice we're going to have 31, 28, 31, 30, so on and so forth. If you look, there's actually 12 of them. So then we come in and we say we're going to have a for loop. And now let's back up a little bit. If I were to say what is going to be the highest subscript of this array, it's going to be 11. Starts with 0, goes through 11. Okay, so if we go down to our for loop here, I'm creating an index to go through my for loop. It's an integer, initialized to 0, and while the index is less than 12, let's continue going through this loop. And each time we go through the loop, let's increase the index by 1. So we're going to say, we're going to basically print out on the console month index plus 1. So again, what we're trying to show is the number of the month. We don't want to say 0. There's no such thing as a 0 month. So the first time through, we want to make sure it says 1. So the index is 0 plus 1 is now 1. Has this many days. We go to the days array, the ice cube tray, and we grab the 0 index. Next time through, index is now 1. We add 1 to it, it's 2. So we're showing the second month. Has days, so we go to the days ice cube tray. We go to position number 1, index 1, and basically grab that, which happens to be 28. And so it's going to do that 12 times, starting with the 0 subscript all the way through number 11. And each time we display it for the month, we add 1 to that subscript, and it's going to show 1 through 12. So if we go ahead and run this, it basically says month 1 has 31, month 2 has 28, so on and so forth. So you can kind of see how that works. So not only can we create an array, we can also go ahead and load it with the initialization, I should say the declaration of that array element. So here we have, again, we're saying it's going to be an integer data type. Left and right square brackets say this is an array. Is equal to, now notice we're not using the new, we don't have to now because it's basically being initialized with 12 elements for that array. Okay, so pretty cool stuff there. Over on page 416, it does show something like this, where we have int left and right square bracket, numbers, codes, and scores. So what we're doing there is we have created 3 arrays with 1 line. So we're basically saying, now the one thing we have, so right now here's something we do not know. We know we have 3 arrays. We know the data type of those 3 arrays. So we've created a blank ice cube tray. We don't know how many elements are in each tray. We've got a numbers tray, we've got a codes tray, and we have a scores tray. So at this point we have no idea what we need to do there. So what we could do down the road is I could say well, let's go on to the next example that should probably explain it to us. So over on page 417, it talks about processing array elements. On page 418, talks about the pay array. So if we open up the pay array, we basically have a constant called employees. We're setting it to 5. I have a double pay rate and a double gross pay. They basically are not initialized. We don't even know what's in there right now. So I create an array called hours, and it's an integer data type. I'm instantiating it as a brand new integer data type with 5 elements in it. So employees has 5. Now you'll notice we never really ever want to type a number in here. We always want to use some type of a variable. In this case, use a constant. And the reason for that is a lot of times we might have different spots that we basically want to initialize that number to or run that number against. So that way there, if we have a constant up here, we will always basically stay consistent. So if I wanted to run this through a for loop 5 times, I would use that constant. If I wanted to create that array with 5 elements, I would use that constant. So again, it really makes a lot of sense to try to, I should say, avoid using hard-coded numbers in arrays and those types of things. So we create an array. So we got an ice cube tray called hours. Everything here is going to be an integer, and we basically have 5 elements in that: 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, I'm going to use my scanner keyboard. Allows me to type in data right directly into my console, and then I basically say system print out, enter the hours worked by 5 employees, all who earn the same hourly rate. So then it says for int index 0, so we're basically saying, okay, we're going to basically create an index for this for loop. We initialize to 0 while the index is less than employees, which is 5. We're going to keep doing this loop. Every time we go through the loop, we're going to increase it by 1. Sysout print employee number. Again, I don't want to start with 0. I always make sure I start with the number 1. So I take my index and add 1 to it. And then I say hours index. So here is my array. Index is equal to whatever I type in. So it's asking me to type in the hours for employee 1 in this case. Next time through the loop, we're looking for employee 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Then I say sysout enter the hourly pay rate for each employee, and then it asks me to just enter the pay rate, which is going to be across the board for each employee. And then I basically go through another for loop where we're going to then take the pay rate times the hours of each employee. So we're going to go through that index, I should say we're going to go through that array via the index, starting with 0 through how many, again in this case the number of employees, which we set to 5, and we're going to display that as a gross pay, which happens to be a double. So if we run this, again it's going to ask me the hours for each employee. So we'll say 34, 36, 38, 40, and 42. Now what's the hourly pay rate for each employee? We're going to go ahead and say $7.50. Hit the enter key, and then basically if you were to take 7.5 times 34, 36, you'd basically get these numbers here. So again, it says employee number index plus 1, which shows a 1 first time through. So 0 plus 1 is a 1, 1 plus 1 is a 2, 2 plus 1 is a 3, so on and so forth. Then multiply each one of those together, and it gives us a gross pay. So not too bad, okay? Not too bad at all. So kind of back to the previous, the array initialization. So what I would do here with numbers is I would say numbers equals int, and basically I would put in a numeric value here. I'll just say 4. Oh, I forgot. What did I forget? Well, since I'm instantiating, I always need a new. So that's how I would instantiate it, okay, with the number of elements in that array. Again, I kind of broke my own rule here. I typed in a hard-coded number. I wouldn't do that. I would actually have some type of constant or variable I would use there. So I can go ahead and create the arrays. They're just sitting there as a blob. There's no elements in there. There's no broken up ice cubes. It's just a blob. We don't know how many elements are in there. And then I go ahead and use this line to go ahead and instantiate the number of elements for each one of those arrays. So what we're doing is, in this case, I'm creating an array. I don't know how many elements I need yet. I might go through some code, and then at that point I will know how many elements I'm going to need. Okay, so if we continue on, we can grab the length of an array. So once an array is created and we have the number of elements, we can actually look at that array and ask it for the length. That is a parameter of the array that we can grab. We also have another for loop we can use. We don't have to use the for we've been using, but there's a better for loop that basically is makes a lot more sense, and we'll see that here in just a sec. So let's take a look at display test scores, and we will kind of see what I'm talking about there. So here I've got int num tests, so just created an integer data type. The variable name is num test. Int left and right square bracket, that says it's an array, is named test. So I've just created a blob called tests. It's an array. Don't know how many elements I need yet. I'm using a scanner keyboard, so I'm going to use my console to type data in to get information back. How many test scores do you have? So in this case, they're asking how many elements of the array are you needing. I type that in, so I now have num test, which is an integer, and notice I now says test equals new int left and right square brackets. Inside of it is num test. So just like the example I showed you a few seconds ago, this is basically what we've done. We now know the number of elements we need for that array, and we can go ahead and create it. Okay, so now up here I created the array. It's a big blob. We don't know how many elements. Down here I've gone ahead and said this is how many ice cubes are going to go in this tray, whatever we typed in. So I've typed in 7. There's going to be 7 compartments. And then I come in here and say for int index equals 0, blah, blah, blah. So again, now look at this. I don't know in the code how many, what the numeric value is we typed in for that particular num test above. But look what I've done here. I say while the index is less than or equal or less than test.length. The dot length parameter of the array will tell us how many elements. So if I typed in a 7, this is going to bring back 7. Okay, and I want to stay less than 7 because remember 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is what we're going to be at. And then it basically displays that. It kind of goes through the same type of parameter. So if I go ahead and run this, it comes up and it's going to say how many tests you have. I'm going to say 7. Enter test score 1. We'll say they got a 90. They got an 80. They got an 85. Whoop. They got an 84. They got an 81. They got a 95. And they got a 96. Okay. So basically I typed those all in, and it says here are your test scores you entered. So it knew, because of the length, how many times to go through that loop. Okay, so pretty cool stuff there. So not only do I don't know, so looking at this code, I never know how many times I'm going to go through or how many elements I'm going to have in the array. It all depends on what the user entered, and that's the key number there. Once I type in that number, then I can use the dot length parameter of the array to basically use that to know how many times I need to go through there. Okay, so we're going to stop right there, and when we come back we are going to go into copying arrays. So we'll see in a little bit.